The UFC is hands down the most dangerous MMA promotion in the world, with over 700 active fighters capable of beating anyone to death. You'd imagine things would get out of hand every now and then. That's exactly what happened when Tony Kelly took things a bit too far by commenting about his fighter's opponent, Viviane Araújo. Keep watching this video as we tell you all about Kelly's below-the-belt remarks and more on the UFC. First up, time for a policy change? We've seen things go sideways numerous times at the UFC, whether it's a scuffle at the weigh-ins, illegal moves inside the octagon, or public brawls. You can just expect anything from this sport. Technically speaking, all this isn't really supposed to happen though, especially when you have a whole code of conduct policy that ensures fighters won't act recklessly inside or outside the octagon. But is it time for a policy change? We think it is. Has Andrea Lee's coach and cornerman taken it a bit too far after his recent comments about Brazilian opponent Viviane Araújo? Perhaps all of this could have been avoided if the UFC had stricter punishments in place. Anyway, Tony Kelly rightfully hasn't had a single moment of rest after making some really disrespectful comments about Araújo between rounds in the intense flyweight fight. He kept telling Lee that Araújo is a cheater. It was probably in the heat of the moment as well, but Tony also said that they're dirty bleep Brazilians. They're gonna cheat like that. Comments like that aren't acceptable no matter what the situation. Even if it's a title fight for the world championship or something, you can't say things like that. And what's even more disturbing about the whole incident is that Tony has openly refused to apologize for what he said. No matter what happens, we're just really happy Tony is facing the heat. And even fighters have teamed up to teach Lee's coach a really valuable lesson. We will stand by our original statement though. There needs to be some major changes in the code of conduct policy. Tony has to be reminded that what he said didn't just hurt a single fighter, it hurt an entire nation. Dana has yet to comment on the incident, but we expect him to take some serious action given the gravity of the situation. He really needs to decide now whether he'll let stuff like that slide in the promotion. Oh, and we're glad Araújo was able to win the fight. She fought beautifully and probably gave Tony a shut-up call as well. Next, it works though. We're not saying that the code of conduct policy is useless or something. It works. It prevents things from going south during high-pressure situations. Take Colby Covington for example, or even John Jones. Both these guys got punished by the policy for acting out in an unacceptable manner. And if that isn't enough, the policy got enforced even when a high-profile fighter like Conor McGregor crossed the line. So yeah, we know it works, but that's not what we're talking about here. What we're trying to say is that the code of conduct should prevent these things from happening in the first place. In other words, you could almost say that the policy is a bit too reactive. It's waiting for someone to make a mistake and bam, it'll get them. But in cases like Tony Kelly, it just can't work. He hurt all of Brazil. It isn't like Araújo is the only Brazilian fighter in the UFC. You have amazing athletes like Charles Oliveira, Jose Aldo, and many more. So his words won't be just damaging to himself, they'll also end up causing a lot of damage to the UFC. But if there was a really strict action for targeting fighters' nationality or something really personal, we're sure Tony would have thought twice before saying what he said. Just imagine for a second that the policy had a clause or something that would result in immediate termination of a fighter, coach, or team member who said something like Tony did. It's strict, no doubt about it. But at the same time, it's necessary, especially with cancel culture on the rise. The UFC should be really careful in making sure every fighter is treated with the same level of respect. Finally, it's the contract, not the policy. If you were to ask us though, we'd probably say it's the contract Dana uses and not really the policy. Whether you like it or not, Dana is a really smart guy. He uses fighter contracts to enforce the code of conduct. That's why literally every deal in the UFC is based on a one-sided contract that only benefits the UFC. How do you think Dana will enforce the policy in Kelly's case? He'll get him to apologize or just terminate his contract. It's really that simple. And sure, you're probably wondering, if it works, what's wrong with it? Well, it just gives Dana too much power. It gives him the power to decide what's right and wrong. Like, remember that time when Conor threw a dolly through a bus window and ended up hurting several fighters? What did Dana do then? Absolutely nothing. You'd imagine some of the injured fighters to make claims or at least some noise, but nope, nothing. Why? Because it's the contract and not the policy. Dana probably just used their contracts to keep them quiet. You could even talk about the time when Conor's Twitter feud with Khabib got out of hand. Conor made some nasty comments about his wife, which almost resulted in legitimate death threats. But what did the UFC boss do then? He told him to cut it out and went back to driving. We have nothing against Dana. We think he does a really good job at running the promotion, but it's sad how he gets to decide what's ethical and not at the UFC. We're 100% sure though that Kelly's going to be punished for his words. Next, in other related news, we have the Diaz delusions. Now, it wouldn't be wrong to say that the Diaz brothers were literally kings of entertainment at the UFC during their peak, but what's unfortunate is that both of them have become rather delusional at the end of their career. Nate is pissing outside of UFC buildings, calling out champions, and blasting Dana for not giving him what he wants. And Nick, well, he's more mature than his brother. We'll give him that much. But what he did recently is just mind-boggling. He's expressed that he still wants to fight. Fair enough. He's a fighter and it'll always be in his blood. But please, for the love of God, don't start calling out champions. Nick just called out the undisputed welterweight champion of the UFC, Kamaru Usman. And the way the brothers call someone out is just absurd. They think they're entitled to these fights. There's no denying these guys did a lot for the UFC, but what they're doing now is honestly making them look super delusional. Now onto Kamaru's secret. Since we're on the topic of champions, would you like to know Kamaru's Kamaru's secret to success inside the octagon. It isn't some fancy affirmation or routine. The secret is so simple that it'll actually end up being a shocker. Squats. That's his secret. Kamaru said that he hates squats, but that's a secret to sheer dominance inside the octagon. He also said that the squats are the reason why opponents feel like a gorilla just grabbed them when he latches onto someone during a fight. The Nigerian Nightmare is set to take on Leon Edwards in a rematch with a title on the line. Surprisingly, a lot of fighters have been labeling Edwards as the only man in the promotion to have a shot at beating the champion. We don't really think that's true, but still, we're not going to rule Edwards out just like that. He does bring a lot to the table, but does he have what it takes to beat Kamaru? Not at all. Anyway, it'll still be a really exciting match to watch. In the meantime, we have some squats to do. And finally, no longer a draw. Former number 2 ranked welterweight Gilbert Burns has revealed that he feels like a draw in the UFC. If a fighter can't find someone to fight, they can just go ahead and call out Burns since it'll be a guaranteed fight. And that's what he wants to change. He expressed how he's been rather open about who gets to fight him. Burns also added that he's never looked at stats like records or rankings. He's pretty much opened up to anyone who's called him out. But this time around, he's gonna be rather picky with who gets to fight him. We think it's a really good move, to be honest. In a league full of ambitious fighters, you need to create your own value. You can't just hand out fights. You have to be the money fight everyone wants. Surprisingly, Burns said that he would only fight a high-profile fighter in his next bout. He isn't settling for anything less. From what we've heard so far, he's been eyeing either Covington or Masvidal. That's it from our side, folks. So what do you think? Is Kelly going to be terminated from the UFC? Does Dana have too much power? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Remember, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more exciting videos in the future. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.